Before the Grand United Canada we know today, Canada was actually divided into two parts, Upper and Lower Canada. Upper Canada's name was eventually changed to Canada West, and Lower Canada's name was eventually changed to Canada East, because neither was really upper or lower. Confederation was the idea of bringing these separate colonies into one unit, into one Canada, and being an independence from Britain. Nobody was really considering Confederation, but people started to worry that Canada might not be able to hold up against a war, or it might not even be able to support itself. On top of this, Britain was basically done with Canada because it was too expensive and wasn't helping them at all. Here are a few events that helped Confederation become an issue. In 1861, on November 8th, the US seized and captured two British Confederates. They were aboard the British ship Trent, and they were in neutral waters. The British in London were pretty ticked off and asked for them back immediately with an apology. While waiting for a response, the British braced themselves for war and started planning their attacks. Thankfully, Abraham Lincoln released the prisoners on December 27th. This would have probably made Upper and Lower Canada pretty uneasy. The prospect of them being the war ground for this or any other issue was a pretty scary one. It would have resulted in a very damaged and an even more divided country. Confederation was probably looking pretty good at this point. December 7th, 1863, while the American Civil War raged. Confederates hijacked the steamer Chesapeake from Cape Cod in the US and brought it back to Nova Scotian harbors. An American ship then took back their ship from Nova Scotia along with two civilians and parked it in Halifax Harbor, where one of the civilians escaped in a melee. This event shows the hostility of Canadian maritimers against the Americans. This hostility was another factor that could have played out into an all-out war, which would have torn apart the Canadas. This tension probably worried a lot of people because Canada, as it was, could not sustain an all-out war and would have been torn apart by it. I'm sure this inspired a lot of people to act upon the idea of Confederation. On October 19, 1864, there was a group of Confederate agents. Confederate agents were sent to different nations to represent America during its Civil War. These agents were based in Canada, and they showed up at St. Albans in the US dressed up like ordinary citizens, and then they proceeded to rob 3 banks. Their spoils were $200,000, which today would be $3 million. These rogue Confederates jumped on some stolen horses and rode across the American-Canadian border into Montreal, which is that way. Once in Canada, they were arrested and the money returned, but America still had plans to follow them in and even take them out if necessary. Following through on this plan would have broken the American-Canadian neutrality and, again, could have led to war. This probably, again, scared people with the thought of war just tearing the Canadas apart. Probably made the idea of Confederation appeal a lot more. The Fenians, or the Fenian Brotherhood, which sounds way cooler, they were a secret society and founded themselves in the United States in 1848. Now you may be wondering, why would these Irish people be in the United States? Well, the Fenians' cunning, top-secret plan was to take over Canada and then trade it to Britain for Irish independence. Hey, Britain. Yes? I'll trade you this slightly rough-conditioned Canada for Irish independence. Actually, no, we don't want Canada anymore. You can keep it. Oh, really? They started launching a series of attacks in 1866 on different areas in Canada, including Quebec, Manitoba, and Ridgeway. I don't have a source picture. Fenians' plan for dominating Canada ultimately failed with the capture of their leader John O'Neill in 1871. I don't know about you, but the thought that a bunch of Irish people just considered Canada as an easy-to-get pawn for their plans doesn't really say a lot to how mighty Canada was. Obviously we needed some kind of uniting, and my vote definitely would have been for Confederation. In 1864, on the 29th of August, a debate on Confederation was held at Charlottetown, and the idea was a popular one. After this, they held some other meetings where they figured out the logistics like Parliament, Federation, and some other boring political stuff. Quebec, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Ontario all joined Confederation in 1867, and were eventually joined by the rest of the provinces in Canada. The British were happy to see us go, and Canada was finally the united and independent Canada we know today. And that's some background info on Confederation in Canada. I'm doing this video for an assignment I'm doing in school, and so I hope you enjoyed it. It wasn't really in my interest either until I researched it, but it's pretty interesting, you know. I mean, guys robbed the bank for like $3 million. It's actually a pretty slick escape, and yeah, it's pretty cool. I have a lot of citations too. I just put those up for you if you're interested in those things. If you're actually one of those people that reads citations. Because that's what you're supposed to do.